Well, I think physics and science and math all close to it.
They say that a physics degree is just as good as computer science, where you can move metaphors between two of them fairly distinct.
Well,
especially these days.
except I can't teach at Foothill because you must have a master's in computer science. My physics degree does not count. So the California State Bar. Yeah. Anyway, I've started the Zoom stream because the City College stream is down today. Perhaps people will eventually notice and wander in. But oh, let me put this. We got 10 minutes before the official time. Let me put up the schedule such as it is. And here we are. Today is 19.
Which is always a
today. Yeah. Chapter 3. Project Orange we do. 9:17. All right, and thought there was some kind of what's going on here. Some kind of special event? Maybe not. This one's over. I respond con Wednesday. Yeah, a few of these things are good to know about. In fact, that's right, especially for this class. If you can get in iRespond con, it's probably the best thing you can do for this class. And instant response con, a local. So I'm in, and I hope if you can make it, check it out. I don't remember. I think somebody told me this. Oh, I think by the time I signed up, I don't remember. I got it confused.
That night we were looking at it.
I don't know. I don't remember. But anyway, something's happening on Wednesday in San Francisco, and then on this is 9/12, and 9/19 is another WISP event. These WISP events have been very good. I'm, and they don't give you any trouble for not being female, so I appreciate it. So 5:38. I think I can't go to this one because I'm teaching, but you folks could maybe. Anyway, but Dropbox again, IR workshop. So both of these are IR-oriented events, and therefore highly relevant for this class. So check them out if you can go. The links are on here. You can go there and try to sign up. The WISP events have been very good. I've been to a couple of them now. So anyway. All right, let's see. I got a few minutes yet. Let me see if there's anything worth mentioning in the news. This one's kind of fun. So is that one. And this is getting a lot of noise. I don't think it matters that much. We'll be talking about that later. All right, here's a few that are kind of relevant. So TOR is in trouble, apparently. The TOR browser, other than the latest one, you can bypass no script. And it's incredibly easy. This is the whole script that does it. It turns out that if you change the type of your page to text, not text HTML, but text HTML JSON, that completely causes it to bypass no script and execute the scripts. So you can totally put HTML on the page. And of course, this is how the FBI caught the pedophiles at Playpen. This is how you do it. If somebody's using TOR, their traffic is bouncing off other people, you don't know where they are. So what you do is you put a script on your page. When they visit your page, you get them to run a script and send a signal to the cops directly from their machine without going through TOR. That's what the cops did. That's what Anonymous did first, and then the cops did it. And normally you have to put malware and have a vulnerability, but he demonstrates right here. Here's how you start an HTTP server on a port right there. This is the attack. So now your machine is listening on a port locally. So all the FBI has to do is scan the suspect IP addresses till they find the one that's listening, and they can put a tag on it, and then they can catch you. This is not quite as cool as having it just send a message directly to you from the criminals, but you know, if you can do this, you can totally find out where somebody is even when they're using TOR, which is the whole point of the thing, to do something and hide where you are. So they're highly recommending updating to the latest TOR. And the big lesson is don't trust Tor too much. You think it's hiding you, but there are ways around it. So it turns out that Tesla's Model S Key Fob, the entire thing relies on a 40-bit key, which is bloody amazing. That's what content scrambling system used to encrypt DVDs, and it was totally broken by brute force in like 98, because 40 bits is totally not enough. You can do 2 to the 40 calculations pretty fast on a modern machine. So Tesla's key fobs could be cloned, but apparently nobody figured it out in time to actually do it, and they've upgraded. So, but they say a lot of other models are still using those old vulnerable key fobs. I have seen a lot of these videos saying these thieves go right into modern cars, they press some button and get right in, and they say they have some magic way to do it that the cops don't understand. So there apparently are pretty serious vulnerabilities in those electronic car openers. And I haven't seen a complete analysis why. So anyway, in case anybody imagine anything else, there was the Equifax breach, and a bunch of people said, well, they're going to pass new rules and everything. Just like there was a savings and loan collapse that destroyed the whole economy through fraud, and everyone said, oh, there'll be big changes made. And in both cases, nothing much happened. And Equifax in particular, nothing much happened. So anyway, that's what I say. They've done an analysis and determined that after the biggest breach in history, nobody really improved their security or anything. That tends to happen, for better or worse. Anyway, it's 6:08. 6:06, all right. Got a little more time before I had to do other things. I might mention this one, which I put in another class. And this one is 10 process injection techniques. We're going to be going through it in this class. We're going and in the malware analysis. Not in this class, the malware analysis class and the exploit development class. We're doing these, so I just might as well mention them. In Windows, there we are. This is the classic way malware operates in Windows. Microsoft uses dynamic link libraries, which means you can run software, and while it's running, you can send it a signal saying, oh, you need to add more code while you're running. Add this library here and run that too. And it says, oh, sure, that'll be fine. So that's what you do. You stick in malicious code to add your running process, and Windows is fine with that. That's the main way you do it, but there's a bunch of other variations. This one here is PE injection. You can inject code right into the portable executable while it's running. You change it in RAM. And then there's the good old process hollowing, which is great fun, where you remove all the code in a running process and just replace it with other code, and it just keeps running as if it was still logged in with the same credentials and everything. No problem at all. We do that in a malware analysis class. We got examples. Here's thread execution hijacking. You stop a running process, change the code, and then start it again with different code. And here's hook injection. This is how keyloggers work. See, the reason why all this stuff happens is Microsoft is an all-purpose operating system, and they have huge backward compatibility so that you can run everything you need to on Windows, and you can run all your old junk, like your cash registers running on Windows 3.1 or MS-DOS or something, because that's a real business need. People have tons of junk installed using some really old versions, and it's still working, and they don't want to replace it. And so you can totally do that with Windows. So that means it has a ton of features to alter execution for strange reasons. You can also do something like invent something new, like a new wireless keyboard, and you need some goofy driver. And so Microsoft has these ways to, oh, before you do anything, add this extra code before we go, because there's some new hardware installed. So they can do anything, but of course the bad guys can use it. So this is hook injection. So every time you press a key, it makes an event, and the event is hooked to run some code because it thinks maybe you have to have some special key handlers because you might have a fancy foreign language keyboard or something, and that can be a key logger. And there's a ton of registry keys that automatically run code for the same reason. There's about 30 of them that automatically launch code every time you reboot, and there's a whole bunch of others, list of things. Oh, before you do that, run this first. Before you do that, run this first. So you can write some goofy piece of hardware or software that requires some special precondition or driver, and you can tell it to automatically run that to make your stuff work. You know, Microsoft never made any bones about this. The point of the operating system is to make it as easy as possible for anybody to develop any new product and sell it and make money. It's a platform to make it easy for you to do whatever you want. And so there are 100 ways to modify it to make things happen, and the bad guys exploit them all. So there's a lot of these that will launch things automatically. Then there's something called extra window memory injection. This is the one that was new to me, not in my books. After you open a window and it appears on the taskbar, you can then say, oh, I've decided you need to add more memory and add more code to the running window. I didn't know about that. That sounds pretty awesome. Apparently you can add malware in there too with extra window memory injection. And then there's shims. I've heard about these a while ago. Shims are another thing. Microsoft has this compatibility tab where you can run code and pretend you're Windows 98 or Windows XP or something. And shims are a way to do that. You can put a code layer underneath your program that creates a different environment for the program to run in. So you can run programs for a different version of the OS or something. And of course, that could be malicious. And the last one was IHE hooking. These are user-defined rootkits, and we're going to do a lot of these in the exploit development class and the malware analysis class. This is how all security software worked until about 8 or 9 years ago. There's a lookup table for all the Windows system routines, and you change the address to go to other words. Every time you, like for example, fundamental routine is like write files, write a file to the disk, or read a file from the disk. And if you're writing antivirus product, before it executes read file, you tell it, don't call the real Microsoft read file, call my antivirus, I'll scan the file, then read file. That's how you hook. That's called hooking into the primary function. That's all how rootkits work. That's how you take the fundamental operations of the machine and modify them. And then how all security software worked for a long time. Microsoft really, really didn't like it. And they finally pretty much discouraged real legitimate software from using it, but the bad guys still write malware that works that way. And it's actually quite easy to spot once you learn how to do a little bit of kernel debugging, which we're going to do. Anyway, those are good, clean, fun things. So I went to this Boss of the Sock event, and we won. So we have a glorious, they give us a glorious trophy. And I know, and the result is, I made it homework. So I feel free. It's actually, I have to put that in the display case next to that movie or something. Anyway, so but the point is, it turns out that a version of this is completely available online for you to do, and it's your homework. I'll show it to you later. It's bloody awesome. There are a whole bunch of network monitoring tools, and they're all garbage except Splunk. You need to learn Splunk. Splunk is what everybody uses. It is very expensive. They make a pile of money. People whine about the price, but then they pay it because it works so much better than the alternatives. And so you guys are going to learn Splunk the easy way. Anyway, so, but let's talk about the usual stuff here, the IR stuff first, and then I'll point out new homework where you learn Splunk. So here's what happens when you have an incident. As I say, everyone is going to ask you, how did they get in? What damage did they do? Are they still doing more damage? What did they affect? And what do we have to do now? Who do we have to tell? How do we fix it? And how do we make ourselves more secure so this won't happen again? The sort of thing that ought to be happening that apparently did not happen after Equifax. So you've got to prepare the organization itself, the IR team, and the infrastructure. And for the organization, you've got to decide what risk is. You have to decide what your assets are and how you're going to protect them, and what the threats are, and what policies will support your IR team. This is the same thing's true, by the way, of the specialized risk of lawsuits. You know, if you're a big company in America, you're just going to get lawsuits all the time, just like any other tax. And you ought to just get used to it. And therefore, if you do, you prepare for lawsuits. You have software running on the system, which will index things and find things so you can easily respond to discovery requests from the court. And in the same spirit, you design your company to have instant response because you know there's just going to be security incidents going on. So your risks are perhaps your corporate reputation, although I'm highly skeptical of this. Everybody got hacked. That does not seem to do them any harm. Equifax came back, Staples came back, Target came back. It seems to only depress your stock for a week. Then everyone forgets about it and carries on, because I think this is kind of like the election of Trump. I mean, there's a bunch of like pious intellectuals that think it proves something, but the fact is, a normal person, so Target got hacked. What am I going to do about that? They still have the cheapest shoes. Am I really going to not buy the cheapest shoes because they got hacked? Does that really matter to me? And I think normal people don't have anything they can do with that information, and so they just forget it and carry on. I know I felt more comfortable using companies after they had a breach because I knew they actually had a security review for the first time ever. The ones that haven't, the other ones just haven't found out they've been hacked. They've probably been hacked too. Anyway, but so then you got your confidential information and your PII and your payment account data, and those are things you really shouldn't be losing, although there is a huge controversy over how much it actually costs you to lose them. The answer is somewhere between 10 cents and $200 per record, are the amount you'll end up paying. And that's an awfully big range. Anyway, so there are weaknesses. You have systems that are unpatched. You have disgruntled employees and untrained employees making mistakes, and those are your exposures. And you have threat actors, people who might exploit those weaknesses to come in. These are people who have the skills to attack you from the internet or who have physical access to the building or the secure areas. And those are threats. So you can have policies, acceptable use policies, limiting what people do on your network, and security policies, and remote access, and internet usage policy. And all these are good because they mean that under normal course of events, people will be doing less foolish things. They won't just be routinely installing extra software on the web server and garbage like that. But if you outsource things, which many companies do, and the bigger they are, the more happy they are outsourced, because I think the financial advantages of outsourcing grow. That's why I was all for it at college. We used to run our own email server, and it was a nightmare. And I said, let's just use Gmail. They have free Gmail for college students. There was a bunch of people that whined about it, but they eventually did it. The end result is it works a whole lot better than it did when we were running our own email servers. And that's what everybody else figures out too. Outsourcing your IT is often very wise, but it means now that you don't even have any access to the infrastructure. So it means you may have extra costs if you tell them you want like logs or disk images or RAM images. You may not be able to get them at all. If it's not in the service level agreement, you may never see the log. You may never know what happened. So you've lost control of your data in a lot of ways by outsourcing. But large multinational organizations love it. And if you're going to go across national boundaries, like many big companies do, then you've really got a problem because your teams are all in different time zones and all that jazz. So it's a big issue. So if you educate your users, there's host-based security. This is typically what happens. They get malware on their own home machine. So there has to be some clear thing they should do. You should tell them who they call. They should know what to do when they find that their company machine has been hacked, or they find malware on it, or they find someone doing something you shouldn't be doing. They shouldn't just be guessing whether they should say something or whether they'll be punished. There should be some policy that they know. Anyway, so I got a few cahoots about that, and then we got another chapter after with more technical stuff in it. But oh, good. I see some people found the online system. Good. All right. And this is, those are the wrong ones, aren't they? All right. I wonder if I have the right ones. This should be, wait a minute, maybe those are the right ones. Yeah, those are the right ones. Okay, good. Good, all right. So there, okay. All right. Oh, I should mute these people. There. All right. They can chat messages, but they can't have barking dogs annoying each other. What usually happens. I find that in all these web conference things, there's somebody with a screaming baby and they have their speakers turned off and they are unaware that they're broadcasting it to everyone. What's funny is when they forget about the webcam and they're really boring conference calls and you watch them like going to sleep, playing video games, eating lunch, you know. All right. I'll give it another few seconds. Okay, there's still a few people coming. Okay. Looks like maybe I got them now. Okay. So, which one of these will reduce the risk from stolen passwords? All right, that's the whole point of two-factor authentication. Google says since they switched to USB stick two-factor authentication, nobody's been able to phish them at all. So apparently that really works.
One of the quiz questions was,
Yeah.
what helps stop phishing?
Yeah.
Two-factor authentication was the answer.
What's the answer?
Yeah, two-factor authentication.
Yeah, good.
How does that work?
Oh, what it means is every time you log
Well,
in.
I know what it means.
Right. Well, the point is,
why does it work?
it stops phishing because phishing means you click on a link and you log in, and I get your password. Yeah, I send you an email. You click on the link, then you go to a fake bank page or something, and you log in. And so that I get your password, but I don't get the stick, which I would say means, actually, the part I don't entirely understand is it seems to me like all they have to do is update their phishing page to get the other thing too, but apparently they aren't in practice getting that. I think what's happening is we're probably in a fool's paradise where right now the bad guys haven't learned to also harvest the second factor. And if everybody all switched to second factor, everybody started using the same one, then they would write scripts to do it. But while there's like 10 different brands of it, and most people aren't using it, then the ones that do use it are ahead, just like people put a club on their car. It's not like you can't defeat the club, but there's a bunch of cars without the club.
So you mean they would like, if you had to enter your text code on the site and it captured that?
It captured that. That's right. That's what a normal, yeah. So I mean, I think it'd be interesting to see this, but I think what it means is that the current phishers are just not very sophisticated. Because if the bank can read the USB stick as well as your password, then I don't know why the phishing site can't also read the USB stick plus your password. But in practice, they don't.
I thought
Yeah.
two-factor authentication was no longer considered that good.
Oh, there's people that complain about it. The one they complain about most is SMS-based two-factor, where it sends you an SMS
right,
message.
yeah,
That's the one.
yeah.
That is the weakest kind of two-factor, or it's pretty weak. And another weak one is just your IP address or a cookie. There are many different versions of
They're much
two-factor.
better than not having it at all.
Yeah, they're all better than not having it at all. But the USB stick is much better. A real physical object. That's pretty hardcore. That's I think that's
a physical object though. It's not a token that you pass, so it actually sends something
yeah.
that runs through.
But
a
the
physical
phishing
circuit.
site could say you have to put it in your stick, and you'd probably do it.
Well, but it only works for that one instance. It's saying it's a one-time.
Oh, it's a one-time. Oh, okay, that's a good point. Okay, so even if they steal it, that's right. They wouldn't. That's right. That makes complete sense. Thank you. Good. That's right. Because the point is, it's running a pseudo-random generator on your thumb drive, putting out a different number every time, and only the legitimate site knows what the number should be. So they can tell if you own the stick. The phishing site could steal the number, but it wouldn't do them any good. They can't replay that number to get in. That does make sense. Good. Thank you. Anyway, so which log is essential to identify systems from IP addresses? Okay, you got to have DHCP logs. If you don't log it, then IP addresses keep changing, and you don't know which system actually had that IP address. All right, which one of these destroys evidence? Pretty rude. That's antivirus. Boy, I remember years ago we used to have McAfee antivirus in the hacking lab, and I would bring in USB sticks with today's homework, and it would wipe it off before I could distribute it. Hey, this is really annoying. Anyway, so all right. So which one has a password that's difficult to change? Those are the service accounts. They're big at corporations. You have an email server logging into things. You have various server logging in automatically to fetch things. And those have passwords that are people often don't remember. They have to put them in when they first install the software. And usually your current generation of IT people do not know how to find those passwords or change them. They know never change that password or everything will quit working. And one of the major breaches did come in through the service accounts. Once you steal that password, you can pretty much go everywhere. And people will not even know you've done anything because humans aren't supposed to log in with those accounts. So they pretty much ignore what happens on those accounts. Anyway, which one is a dangerous Microsoft feature? RPC is, a few years ago, I had snarky students saying they all are, but not anymore. Microsoft is actually pretty good these days in their security. Most of their products are pretty good as open source. Anyway, I guess I need to make it smaller to see the 3 winners. There's the 3 winners. Okay, so let me make a note of this, and then we will carry on. Wahoo will have to tell me who they are at some point. And Shellbags, I think I can guess who that is. Is that you, Mark? Shellbags is not you. All right, anyway. Anyway, I'll find out eventually who these people are, or hopefully, but let's carry on here. So, all right, so the IR team, these guys have to respond to incidents. They have to have some kind of formal process so that you know what they've done. Yeah, it's only the top 3. Anyway, then they have to decide if it occurred, assist the damage, control and contain it, and improve your posture so it doesn't happen again. Then they have to maintain confidentiality. This is in my CISSP class, I make students sign non-disclosure agreements, and we do real security assessments, and you really have to shut up about them. And this is, you know, why when I was on a jury recently, and when they found out I was a hacker, they were all totally freaked out, although 3 people on the jury were in this field. There was a guy there from Facebook's anti-spam team, and another one. Lots of us were in security, which they did, so they I wasn't sure they could trust me. So they asked me, "What do you think of Snowden?" And I said, "They should lock that guy up." They said, "Okay, you're gonna be on a jury." So he had a duty to shut up, and he didn't shut up. And this is the thing: you have to shut up, like a doctor or a lawyer. You are going to know stuff that is private stuff, and that's, well, you know, that's why I seem to be a right winger around here, because they want to dump out Kavanaugh's personal work with his attorney with somebody. I don't think so. As a matter of fact, Trump is right. I don't like Trump being right, but he's not wrong all the time. He's right. You can't be dumping out personal attorney stuff. It's got attorney-client privilege. Anyway, so, and you have to provide expert testimony. Your team has to be able to do that if you want to go to court. Yeah.
Did she ask him? I figured Harris did this.
Yeah.
Did she ask him for the content, or did she do the metadata?
Oh, well, they asked her everything, and they didn't get it.
So
and that was
did you
the
ever
reason.
talk to anybody there that didn't ask what she was talking about?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know the details. There may be more to it. But anyway, so you got to have communication. Your legal counsel will want to be in on things. And this, of course, is one of the sort of dodgy things. A lot of times they include a legal counsel in a discussion, not because it has any legal consequences, but because you want to be able to not provide it to the other side in case of a lawsuit. In fact, my lawyer actually wanted to talk about making a disclosure service explicitly for this, where he would be your lawyer, you would tell him the vulnerability, he would then tell the company, this guy found the vulnerability, they'd say, "Who is it?" So we can lock him up. And he said, "I'm not telling him because of attorney-client privilege." See, not very many people are allowed to not reveal their sources. Journalists, for example, are not allowed to protect their sources. If they come to you and say, "Who committed this crime?" You have, like the New York Times right now has this insider, you know, and they say, "We know who he is, and we're not going to tell you." You know, they don't have any legal right not to tell them if they can decide that there's probable cause that that person committed a crime by saying he's like thwarting Trump's activities, which it might very well be a crime. So anyway, and if they come to the New York Times and say, "Cough up the answer," they have no way to hide behind. The only people allowed to hide are married couples, the wife doesn't have to testify against the husband, priests, and lawyers, and doctors. But who else?
Shrinks.
Shrinks, right, they're doctors, yeah. Those people have secrets and they're allowed to not cough it up in court. But if you're a journalist and they say, "Tell us who your source is," you have to cough it up and lock you up. So it's, anyway, that's an issue. So you often include your legal counsel, you include this notice. If you put this note on an email, then it is not discoverable. You do not have to report it to the other side if it has evidence in a lawsuit. And that's a really big deal. This appears like this is really going to cost Google $4 billion. Google built Android, and they built Android on Java, and all the apps are in Java. And when they first started it, one of the Google engineers wrote a note saying, "Dude, Java is not freeware. It's proprietary Oracle software, and we'll end up having to pay licensing fees. If we use Java, we should use something else." And they said, oh, no, it'll be fine. It doesn't matter. And they put this note on some of the emails, but somebody forwarded the email and stripped this note off. And so when they got sued by Oracle for using Java without paying license fees, the e-discovery company made a mistake. See, if there are 100 copies of this email and one of them has this note, it's not discoverable. But they ran their software and it found the one that didn't have the note, and they didn't realize it was a duplicate of ones that had the note, and they gave it to Oracle. So Oracle had the smoking gun saying, you bums totally knew that you were using Java and you had to pay royalties, and then you just didn't do it. And it's going back and forth in the courts. It's the latest appeal. Looks like Oracle's back on top again. It's $4 billion they're fighting about, because it's all they owe Oracle a bunch of money for every Android phone, or maybe not. But that's one failure to honor this confidentiality clause can lead to that. I don't think I want to be that. Well, that's apparently what I heard. 3 or 4 billion is what I heard. It might be growing as it goes year after year.
Based on the scenario you gave,
yeah.
Sounds like a lot more than 4 billion based on how many Android.
Yeah, well, I think it was 3 billion that Oracle asked for at first, but that was years ago. So yeah, anyway, it's a pile of change. I wouldn't want to be the guy that made that mistake. That seems like a career-limiting move to me.
Licensing Java, though, would only be like a few cents per device.
It would be, but that would be a lot of money by now.
Yeah, it would be. It's still
Yeah.
good.
You know who makes a lot of money off Android is Microsoft. Microsoft gets a lot of money for every Android phone. They own part of it. It's a strange world we live in. Anyway, so they can't sell their own phones. They're making money off the Android phone. Anyway, so, and you know, the other fun thing is, you know, iCloud. iCloud lives on Microsoft servers. Apple can't run servers with it. Damn, it lives on Azure. It always has. I don't know why Microsoft doesn't advertise this. I would be mocking the hell out of them if I said, maybe it's in the agreement, you won't mock us for doing this.
AWS too, right?
No, well, I don't know. I know a lot of it's on Azure. Azure is apparently cheaper.
iCloud's been on AWS and Azure for quite a couple of years.
Yeah, I didn't know it was AWS all yet, but they can't run it on Apple servers because Apple can't run servers. I met a guy getting Apple server certification. I was getting Microsoft certification. Apple servers? Are there Apple servers? Yeah, they're Apple servers. Gee, do anybody use them? Yeah, they use them. they interact with Active Directory users? Yeah, they do. It's all crap. There are no Apple servers. Nobody uses them. Somebody ripped him off making him get Apple server certification.
So they only did for 3 years.
I know,
I did
but they never went anywhere, you know. They tried to make servers,
Yes.
just like Microsoft tried to make phones, but the world's still laughing at both of them. It's not their skill set. Anyway, so now your attackers will often read your email, so you can't be using your email to plan your response, or you have to either encrypt your email or you have to go through other channels like telephone calls or something. And so you have to monitor people in your conference calls and such, because attackers will see sneaking in. Who's this weird guy on our conference call with our lawyers this week? An extra person could very well be the attacker and all that jazz. You can encrypt your email for free. There are free certificates out there. It's just kind of a pain to set it up, but you can encrypt everything with S-MIME, and there are other systems like PGP that are really painful. S-MIME is the relatively painless way to encrypt email. And even your communicating with external properties, then again, you should have approved channels when you're making official legal statements to compliance agencies and such. And you should have a series of reports coming from the IR team. They should be professional. You really have to think like lawyers. You have to give official, clear documents, well written, well presented, regularly, so people know what you're doing. You can't just be a bunch of crazy hackers running around the room doing God knows what. And people say, what are they doing? You said, I don't know. They all seem crazy. This is not good. Now, your technical people probably fit that description, but you have to have a member of your team who wears a suit who does not fit that description, who provides these reports so that management has someone they can talk to that seems to be like mature and reasonable. And so if you're putting out status reports frequently, response reports of what you found, forensic examination reports, reports about your malware and the intrusion, you know, and there are templates for these things, and they should be beautiful looking business-like PDF files and all that jazz. That's what makes the lawyers and the corporate executives happy. Then they feel like it's worth paying them a pile of money because these, like Mandia, totally professional, beautiful stuff. It makes a huge difference. Sort of like they're saying at the job fair, it matters when you show up in a suit. You got to have beautiful documents going out so they feel like they've hired trustworthy professionals here, not just a bunch of crazy hackers babbling binary nonsense, which is probably who's really doing the work. But anyway, and you go training out there. SANS has classes, and I think they even have IR certifications, and of course the big security colleges have them too. We got to see a little bit here, but there are master's programs and stuff that go further, and you might be able to find people with credentials that would actually come from a college that might actually mean they can do it, although in general, nobody really trusts anything but real experience in any field that's new like this.
Carnegie Mellon,
Yeah.
SCI, they had the contract when I was in the Army.
Yeah, yeah, and Carnegie Mellon is way ahead of everybody in this space. I think because of their close association with the military, because the military is where all this came from, of course.
But they just turned all that content over to DHS, I think. Or
Well, unless something has changed at DHS, that's going to be the end of it.
but it's all with the feds now.
Yeah.
Didn't a lot of this stuff start from business and IRS?
The private sector has done some of it, but as far as I know, all the serious tools are repurposed military tools in general. I don't know necessarily, but I think the military has been here first with all this security stuff. And all the private stuff is imitation military stuff.
Spook stuff, huh?
Yeah, the spook stuff and the security stuff, even the physical security stuff and the electronic security, it all came essentially from military, I think.
That was the mistake. Yeah.
Well, you know, it's, I don't know if it's,
Because finally we started fighting it, we had to go off the shelf.
Yeah.
When the military has it, it just stagnates.
yeah, that's,
It doesn't move forward. And now it's better in the private sector.
yeah, that's a huge problem. The military has this huge burdensome infrastructure like the college, which is part of the government. The same thing. It's very hard to do anything new. There's this huge ponderous structure and tradition that makes it very hard to innovate. And not innovating fast in this field is really bad.
Get it from the Mossad.
What's that?
Get it from the Mossad.
Oh, yeah, the Mossad, they don't let the grass grow under their feet over there. They're very different than our military. Anyway, so you got to have hardware. You got to encrypt your stuff. You got to have large disks to store all this data, and it's got to be encrypted with some kind of full drive encryption. So that if somebody loses a laptop, you haven't lost it. And your removable stuff, of course, has to be encrypted because that stuff's likely to get lost. TrueCrypt was very popular. It's now considered abandoned, although nothing was ever found really wrong with it. But anyway, there are now it's just no longer necessary. There's Apple FileVault and there's Microsoft BitLocker, and there's really no need for TrueCrypt. Anyway. So you got in the field, if you're going to be going out with a laptop to investigate devices and gather evidence, then you need, of course, a fast machine with a lot of storage and all the fastest buses and everything. The forensic people spend an incredible amount of money on hardware because they make a lot of money testifying in court, and they think nothing of $10,000 or $20,000 machines, and they handle so much data. You do whole disk images that they just have mountains of stuff. The guy, one of my forensic experts, had a whole safe like a bank to store all his evidence in. You know, it's ridiculous. And so you never can have enough gadgets. They'll think nothing of selling a new $10,000 forensic gadget to people because the people in the business just are rolling in the dough. You charge like $900 an hour to do a forensic examination. It's really nuts. Anyway, write blockers are real important. If you're going to image hard drives, you have to have a device that prevents you from altering the data while you're collecting it from hard drives. Although in the field of incident response, we're not going to do much of this whole drive imaging because it's too slow and burdensome. That would be your last resort. But if you want to do it, there's a whole bunch of fancy gadgets you have to get. Back in the old days, like 15 years ago, a write blocker consisted of one of those flat cables for the hard drive where you cut the write pin. You just cut one wire, and now it's a write blocker. But now they're $400 devices because modern computers with the SATA and PATA connections, they have to touch a drive every time they boot up. They have to update the journal, make an entry, check the recycle bin, and all that jazz. So you have to have a computer in the middle that lies to the computer, your computer, and tells it all that stuff is happening when it isn't. Or it can't mount it to read. So they're actually quite complicated devices now. Yeah.
Don't they ship off things like JTAG, they like use certain pins to collect
Oh
data?
yeah, that's another whole one. If you want to do like an SSD, then you have the chip off is where you take the chips off the motherboard, off the board, and then you read the bits one by one out of the chips. That's how you do SATA acquisition if you can't do it logically. Yeah, they can do that. If you want to do this stuff, unless you are super rich, I would just outsource it to Drive Savers. Drive Savers in Nevada is the king of this. And for a pile of cash, they will totally do this. They have a clean room. They have forensic experts to testify in court. They'll handle criminal cases. They can totally do it. and they've got all the stuff, and they got staff trained up to do that. So that's a answer if you have a one-time need, not just an endless chain of lawsuits where you have to do this kind of stuff. Anyway, and of course there's other companies, but DriveSavers is, I think, widely respected as the best. Anyway, so you got all these large storage devices and power strips and cables and maintenance tools and all that to play with the hardware. Police stations have all this, where they're examining all the seized evidence from crimes. We had a few tours of them in the when I taught forensic class, and you know, it's just like a serious tech support place, just cables and boxes of computer equipment everywhere, because they have to be able to take apart every brand of everything and get in. Cell phones are the worst. You can pay $10,000 for a cell phone forensic kit, and you have to get a subscription where they send you more junk every 3 months, and you have 100 cables, because you have to be able to get into every different brand of cell phone, and they're all different. Anyway, companies often don't have to bother with all that because they really only want to get in the company equipment, and at least until recently they would have a company standard hardware and everybody'd have the same thing. That's not really that true anymore. But anyway, so your network monitoring platform is more directly relevant to what we're going to do. We're not going to be doing hard disk images in this class. That's for the forensic class, and it's not much you do in instant response. But what we are going to be doing is network forensics, quite a lot of it. And so network forensics, you have to be sniffing the network and recording that data, and you have to be running several analysis tools to create metadata in the form of alerts, which we'll be looking at a little later when you do it to a SNARK project. So the ultimate thing that captures off the wire is typically a 1-unit rack-mounted system, a special thing on the network just to sniff it. And it has to be very fast because it has to keep up with the full speed of the network without slowing it down. There are several projects that develop network sniffing tools. Security Onion, and here's a few others. I taught a class of network security monitoring, and we tried to use Security Onion. It totally doesn't work. The point of Security Onion is it was the prototype, open source product that they used to develop all these techniques, but it just doesn't work. It will make you cry. Everything crashes. Half the tools use things that don't work anymore. They vanish in every distribution. The only point of using Security Onion is to suffer until you're ready to pay what it costs to buy Splunk. It is an advertising tool for Splunk. And the developers will probably send me nasty tweets after this because they're working on it. They're super proud of how great it is. Well, I tried using it. I tried giving it to my students, and all of them just suffered greatly. They totally install it, and 3 of them just don't work for no reason at all. It just makes you want to cry. So anyway, and then you get Splunk, and it's so nice. All you need is to pay them a pile of money, and you get something that works. Capitalism. I'm all for it. Anyway, so now, that's probably right. Yes. Well, that's why I went there to learn about it. I said, yes, I want to learn Splunk. I'm willing to. I've had one time students barricaded my office and wouldn't let me out. They said I was draining the souls out of students and turning them into mindless wage slaves to support the military-industrial complex. I finally said, yes, that's exactly what I'm doing. Get out of my way so I can do it some more. Yeah. What's that? Yes. Yeah. Oh, you know, well, there's people like that. There's red communists. It's a valid position to take, but it's not the one I take.
How long ago was that?
Oh, maybe 8 years ago.
8 years.
Yeah. Oh, I know it would have been more appropriate in the 60s. It hasn't ended yet. There's still some around. In fact, I was reading The New Socialists, inspired by Bernie, and they're saying stuff like that again. That stuff's coming back. Anyway, Anyway, some people believe there are certain forensically sound software products you should use in court in case strongly tells you. Use it in case courts will approve it. If you use something else, courts won't trust it. And that is not really true. There's a thing called the Daubert Standard for Forensic Evidence. Now, forensic science is really very disturbing. It sounds like science, and when you actually find out how it works, it is much more like witchcraft. It is. And think you know there have been so many forensic scandals of forensic experts just lying, falsifying the evidence, and being incompetent and using terrible things. All the hair matches, they recently had to say they're not going to accept them anymore because this thing where they say they can tell one hair from another is all crap. Anyway, it is amazing how much arbitrary human judgment there is in what ought to be sort of science. But anyway, here's the Daubert Standard to try to decide if things are admissible. It has to be a scientific theory, empirically tested, and it has to have been reviewed in sort of serious scientific papers, and you have to have some general acceptance of it, and the expert has to be clear enough in explaining it, and they have to have enough. They love to see you have degrees and papers and formal training and stuff to make it seem like you're really an expert in the field, because the forensic expert is the only person in court that can do a transfiguration. They can turn opinions into facts. Everybody else can only testify to what they saw. And if they have an opinion, that is not evidence. But the opinion of the expert is evidence. And that's based on this Daubert test, is the test which they use to decide if you are credible enough that your opinion should be accepted. And a really common group of people that become forensic experts is college teachers, because it is exactly the same thing. You have to explain to the judge and the jury some technical thing in terms that they can understand without getting complicated. And you have to really know it to where they believe you really have it. But anyway, the problem with college teachers is they ramble off the point. And you really have to shut up and answer just the one thing and not open cans of worms. Like, don't mention the exceptions that meaning might be wrong. No, shut up, shut up, shut up, shut up. That's what you naturally want to do, but no, no, no. And so anyway, yeah.
Prosecutors want to know all the exceptions.
Of course. And you don't want to give it to them. What you want is you want to make their expert drag it out. And the point is, almost always their expert is a blithering idiot. The typical forensic expert is a police officer who has been to a 3-hour vendor training course on how to use Encase. They have no idea what they're doing at all. And it is very easy to run rings around them. They just run a tool, they click acquire disk, print out report, here's the report, and they really don't know what's happened. At least that was true a few years ago. And I think it's still largely true. Forensic experts are very hard to find. So
Why is that?
Well, I don't know. It's a good question. But there's not enough of them. I think it's like the rest of security. There's a huge lack of people that are any good at any aspect of security, and forensic experts are there too. Yeah.
Part of it is the certifications that you do. So I was looking into the forensics, and it requires you to do a lot of certifications and a lot of the hardware, years of experience, and it requires you to clearance, some kind of clearance.
Well, those are interesting issues, but you do not need any certification to be a forensic expert. There is no generally accepted certification, and there's no certification of your equipment or your tools either. It is all in how credible you are in court. And I know some of my teachers use open source products that they wrote themselves in court, and it's fine because they convince people that they know what they're doing. So it's court is a whole lot less perfect than I imagined it was from a distance. That's why when I used to believe all these people say they're innocent in jail, and I said, oh, they're just lying, and I'm not so sure anymore. I'm afraid a lot of them really are innocent, and they really did just get trumped up. I think the evidence is pretty clear that that happens a lot more than I had imagined. I thought we had like a 1% failure rate, but I'm afraid it's more like 20%. And I don't have proof of these numbers, but anyway. So then you got software like Kali and Kane and Helix used. You can use a boot disk to acquire evidence, and NIST has them, and you can capture the memory with a variety of tools. We're doing it with FTK Imager, but there's a lot of others. If you do live response, as we talked about, it is not reproducible, and it does not measure a system without modifying it. So it is down to the level of every other kind of forensic, like analyzing a blood spatter or a corpse. You have to change it to examine it, and you can't do it again. So where it's not like it's totally wrong and it won't be admitted in court, but it doesn't have this mathematical perfection that the old hard disk image had, where you had one image that was the perfect image and it would never change. And so Encase and FTK are the kings of this, the big suites that cost 50 or 100 grand and have every possible feature. And then the Sleuth Kit and Autopsy is the open source equivalent. And it's pretty good, but it's much, much clunkier and smaller and harder to use and uglier. That's what you got by not paying all that money. And so anyway, you have to maintain your integrity with positive control, which means you have to have a chain of custody. The evidence has to be stored if you're going to go to court. Most corporations just don't bother with any of this. They abandoned all hope right from the start of going to court. They say, I don't really want to lock anybody up. I just want to find out what happened and cope with it. Because they don't need to go to court, because they can just fire people to punish them. They don't need someone else's help to punish their employees. They can totally punish them themselves in most cases. The only reason they want to go to court is because they're particularly vindictive, or because they're hoping to deal with their external agencies that are going to blame them and blame it on somebody else. Anyway, so you have to keep hash values of your evidence and send it through a traceable media so you can say it didn't get tampered with in the mail, and have the chain of custody. And just like the forensic expert, the chain of custody is really a list of humans. Evidence is people. Evidence is not things. Evidence is people testifying about the things, because the whole American justice system relies on you deciding how much you trust a person. So anything is no use unless you have a person there to testify. This is the thing, I had it, I locked it in the safe, I made sure nobody messed with it, and the jury will decide how much they believe the person. And this is just a record of which people will testify saying they controlled the thing. And so there's a whole page here, a whole PDF you can get from the government about evidence handling, and it's very nice. One of my forensic teachers, Steve Haley, you've talked about, there's just 10 basic rules. And he said, if you obey these, you will always win because the other side never did them. And they're very simple, like use a machine that's not connected to the internet. So there's no issue there. Clean the hard drive completely before you put the evidence on it, so there's no old data on it. Make sure it's always locked up and you're not in use. They're very simple things like that. And you say you always find when you go to court that the other guy did not really do these things. And if you did, the jury will totally like you and hate them, and you'll win. Because they do judge whether you seem to be a blithering idiot. The trial I was in, the forensic reporter was in fact a complete blithering idiot, and nobody believed a word he said. That is quite common, yeah.
So in the court of law, you'd have a prosecutor who's got the DA's team, and
yeah,
forensics lab is really expensive, and have people who run the stuff.
Right.
So what would the other side have?
They have to hire their own forensic expert to rebut the other guy. You have to have your own forensic expert that gets a copy of the data and they analyze it. You have to have your own expert to oppose. Otherwise, you're going to just have to accept what the state's expert says. And so that's why if you give a talk about forensics, I did this, you'll be contacted by defense lawyers the next day. They wanted to give me cases. And I'm like, who are you kidding? I'm just a college teacher on like chapter 2. I'm totally not qualified to defend somebody, but they're desperate. They want somebody.
They don't have the bandwidth for finding all this.
Of course, they don't have the money, and they'll set. That's why you get a lot of complete idiots in there. There's no vetting or anything. I'm sure a lot of them go down in flames. A lot of horrible mistakes in court. I heard about them from my the teacher that works. I was trained by a guy that works for the Washington State Teachers Union, and his students went off and did all sorts of wrong things in court, and he had to save them and stuff. You know, there's a bunch of amateur interns in there presenting the wrong evidence, using pirate copies of the tools. There's like one of the major tools, it'll put a line, every 10th line it'll say, demo version, not for use in court. So they just Photoshop those lines out and put it in court. And he's like, dude, you can't be doing that. Was one of his 10 things. Use legal copies of the software. This would seem kind of obvious, but you know, anything that can go wrong will go wrong. Anyway, so I got a few more cahoots about that stuff. I was horrified when I found out that you have to be on one side, prosecution or defense, and you'll never be able to go to the other. I thought, we're scientists are above all that. All we care about is the truth. They laugh at me. Ha, ha, ha. You're new in this game, aren't you, kid?
Once you go one side, you can't. Wow.
You can't. I'm in the High-Tech Crime Investigators Association, which I recommend. But in order to get in, you must get a recommendation from like a law enforcement officer. And what they have to test, you have to promise you have never worked in defense. And I hadn't. And if you had, that's it. You're like poisoned and they won't let you in anymore. Because from their point of view, you're the enemy. And if you go to their conference and you talk about their methods, you're the enemy finding out their ethics. And I thought the forensic examiner is above all that and they're impartial. That is not true at all. Yeah, that's disturbing. The scientific purity is highly impure. Well, apparently not. That's our adversary system. I mean, both sides have a duty to twist the facts as much as they can. When I was in court, it was abundantly clear the lawyers were lying to us like crazy. The only thing we cared about was when the defendant lied. We held that against them, but we understood the lawyer's job was to lie to us all the time.
The law enforcement side?
Oh, I think it's not that simple. I think some people have the high-profile cases and the fancy defense lawyers, but what my forensic examiner said is you really want to work for law enforcement because it's a steady work, and you're almost always on the side of the angels because most of the time the cops are right. Even the most cynical person I don't think would say their error rate is greater than 50%. Most of the time you're trying to prosecute people who are guilty, and so you're helping the right thing happen. Whereas if you're on the defense side, most of the time you're helping criminals get away with stuff. That's why they the other side has such a bad attitude towards them. That is how our system works, but it is certainly true that I think they do have trouble sleeping at night because, in fact, they're getting bums out there to do more crime. But that's our system. We used to just have guys with swords hack each other. You was right. And we're not all that far from it. Anyway, I'll wait a few more seconds. All right. Anyway. So which one protects data on a stolen laptop? A stolen one. All right, that's full disk encryption. That's the whole point of it. If you encrypt a disk with one of these tools like FileVault, and you lose it, you can go to court and say we didn't lose the data. It was encrypted. Nobody could get it. That holds up in court. That's the whole point of it. And it's all, as far as I think, they all use AES, which is the standard and perfectly fine if correctly implemented. It's probably true. Nobody is getting in there without the key. All right, which one prevents an email from being discoverable? I don't know if that noise was coming through the Kahoot or what. And Halloween, because you're putting out noises like that. Anyway. Okay, that's the privileged label. That's what it does. That's why they put that on the emails. Then you do not, non-discoverable means if you're sued, you do not need to give that to the other side as evidence. That is attorney-client confidential. So you put all your dirt in there.
But it's got to be with lawyer on one side.
That, right? No, it just has to have that note. I think, yeah, I think including a lawyer is good too. But I think, anyway, which one is network monitoring software? All right, that's Security Onion, such as it is. Okay, which one will tell you about running process? All right, and that's a RAM. The RAM tells you about that. All right, so I got the winners. And I have two more things I need to show you. I need a little more of the stuff in the book, and then the Splunk thing, which you're going to like. Let's take a 10-minute break before we do that and pick up at 7:05. If you are a winner, you might want to come tell me who you are so you get your points. People using pretty obscure fake names today. Password, I think that's you, right? Okay, good. I know the Luttgens, and you're the smiley face. Okay, good. Then I have names. I'm going to pause the recording, but I'll leave the share going. Okay. That's all right.
I got a lot of information.
All right. Well, we'll see. And I can help you do it in the lab too. All right, folks, let's pick up again because I want to get to the Splunk, which is going to be pretty exciting. So the infrastructure. You got a few things you have to do there. All right. You've got to have asset management, and you have to perform an inventory of your devices. There are software solutions for this that ask all your things to find out what you've got. And then you have network segmentation, about which we got quite a bit more to say. Your networks are very complicated. This college has 100 VLANs, and it's not that big a place. But you do have a lot of segments in your network if you get set up correctly. So attackers will often look for the neglected devices that you don't care about that are sitting on the side, not important anymore. That's obviously likely to be unpatched and unmonitored. You spend most of your time, of course, focusing on what really matters, the new exciting thing that is actually producing your product. And there's always a bunch of junk on the side that nobody really understands. So this is the point. You have to first understand what you have. One of the first steps in preparing to be a secure company is very painful, which is, what are your assets and where are they? Even the simple question, like how many copies of your ultra important crown jewel data are there and where are they, most companies cannot answer. It's on the server, it's on people's thumb drives, it's in their email account, it's on their home machine, it's on their cell phone, it's in Amazon services that people have set up without the approval of the IT department. It's just all over the place. And that's why your first step is to just inventory what you have. Yeah.
Very common work for interns
Yeah.
in IT is inventorying thousands of machines. And there's actually an internship coming up at Lawrence Berkeley Lab.
Oh, good.
They're like, we want to know what all of these things are that are connected and the lights are beeping. And we have no idea what they do.
Yeah, I know colleges are the worst.
Yeah.
Colleges have all these crazy teachers and students setting up projects, and then nobody ever really knows when they're done, and they don't tell anybody in central position that exists. So there's all this weird stuff going, and nobody has any idea whether it's okay to turn it off. I know. So actually, that's a good job for interns.
Yeah. Key Fob did one over the summer here. I guess it might still be going on.
Yeah.
They said it was going to take 4 months to do all the inventory. But they put stickers on stuff that people had brought in to the Star Lab.
Yeah, well, that's another thing. I mean, I don't have sympathy for it. If you do something like walk in our hacking lab, you wander around and say, how much of this stuff is campus property? There's nobody to make that clear. It's God knows what it all is. And yeah, it's, yeah, well, they do. So I can see how whoever has to put on the stickers has this impossible job. What is this weird stuff? Where did it come from? Was it bought for the college? And the answer is a whole lot of it is actually not really clear. Somebody sort of brought it to the lab and abandoned it there. And anyway, so
That big server in the middle of the place.
that's right. That big server was donated by a couple of people. It was done to the college, sort of, but not very officially. So it's really not entirely clear who owns it or anything. And this happens a lot. Yeah. Anyway, so host hardening is a big issue. If you buy gadgets or install operating systems, you don't just leave them in a default state. You have some hardening rules, and this is necessary because they always have vulnerabilities you don't need, like they're running services you don't need, have ports open you don't need. So you have to have some policy of how you harden them. And there are a bunch of online recommended states. Microsoft has a bunch of recommended security configurations for things like a domain controller, a web server, an email server, and the military has standards, and there are various standards also. And you should have one of these, and you should know that all your hosts have been hardened to the appropriate step. And you have to have all this information about them. When, who's in charge, when was it put out there, when was it last updated, how is it configured, connected to the network, and all that jazz. And what operating system it has, all that you need, all your networking devices, all your security devices, all this stuff. It's a big old job of a giant database someplace to keep track of all this, but you need to have it, among other things. I haven't heard of this happening in about 10 years, but one thing that used to happen pretty often is that Microsoft would come down and say, how many licenses do you actually have for all their copies of Office and Windows that you're running? And people were paying like $1 million fines and stuff. In fact, now if you install modern versions of Microsoft Office or Windows, they expect you to run a licensing server that does nothing except keep track of the licenses for all of it so you can prove that it's all licensed. And that's, in the modern world of compliance, you have more and more of that going on. Automatic scanning of everything so you can easily produce a report listing what you've done and proving that it's up to the recommended standards. I know the military is good at defining these standards, but when they test them, 95% of them are out of compliance because actually living up to the standards is very hard. Yeah?
They, are the cloud houses?
Are the cloud what?
Microsoft Office?
Microsoft Office, yeah, that would be,
Take a monthly fee.
yes, that's right. That would be another good reason to outsource. If you just used Office 365 in the cloud, you pay a monthly fee and so you know it's licensed. So you wouldn't have to bother with this stuff. That's why, that's one of the many reasons why everybody's going to the cloud. A whole lot of this gets easier when you outsource it to a cloud vendor. Anyway, then of course you've got passwords all over the place. And the bad guys will find your central repository of passwords, which is usually a domain controller, and steal them all. And the problem is, even if you have good password policies, there's a few of them that are weak, and all I have to do is crack one or two, and then they're in. And another thing that happens over and over again, and I see it in almost every report of an intrusion, is that all the machines had the same local administrator password because they were all made from the same image. So all you have to do is steal one, and now you've got local admin on every box. That keeps happening over and over and over. It's almost impossible to avoid because everybody has to ghost everything. So there is one master copy it all came from. And like here, you got these service accounts. You can see them in services in Windows. You see services that log on as local system, service, all these local services have their own accounts and their own password, and they're connecting into many systems. Those are the service accounts we were talking about that typically have a password no one knows that never gets changed. So all you have to do is find one box where you can steal the password and you can travel everywhere that service goes. And so then, like say, compliance with licensing and software metering, there's performance monitoring just to see if things are working. And then you have firewalls and event and access logs all over the place. And you really need a central log management system. And that's what Splunk is. Splunk is a SIM where you take all the information from all the logs and put it in one place. And now you can efficiently search it and answer questions about what happened. If it's just a log on the firewall, a log on the server, a log on that server, AV log somewhere that you look at one by one, you're never going to find anything. So there are free products like Elk, and there are commercial products like Splunk and many others that are out there. And there are even hardware boxes you can buy to be the server. Most of them are software only. You install an agent on all different devices, and they all send data over the network to a central point where the central device has a huge database of all the log entries that you can search. Is
there any time when it's so good to use a box? I mean, I go to all these conferences and everybody's got a hardware box they want to put on, you know.
Yes, yeah, that's right. I mean, everyone likes to sell you hardware boxes. That was all the rage like 10 years ago. Everybody had your all-in-one security box, which is basically a big layer 7 firewall. Most of those are terrible because what happens is the company goes broke and your box is useless. And now if you stay with somebody that isn't going to go broke, like Cisco, and get like a Pix or something, that's good for a while. But you know, it's management often likes them. It often has a controlled amount of cost and a controlled, it's often good for PCI compliance. So, you know, but for all those far is typically preventive measures. And the point of this is we've now learned that preventive measures never really work completely. There's always some attacks that get through your preventive measures. So you have to have a response to that, and that's where we are now. So this is the monitoring part, to monitor after you have all that. And so I mean, it's not necessarily bad to do it with a hardware device. Just you'd not even be cost effective. Yeah.
So Splunk is commercial.
Splunk is commercial. There is a free version, but the free version can only do 500 megabytes of data per day, which sounds like a lot, but it's not a lot. So you can do little projects and practice with it. But to deploy it, you then have to pay by the megabyte, and it's a lot of money. People are paying $20,000 a year or more to run their Splunk, and they're happy to pay it because it really works. And it makes it possible to do a job that is almost impossible otherwise, as we're going to see. And then you have to retain log data, of course. PCI requires you to retain it for a year. There's a huge amount of storage you got to put somewhere. And so here's what you got to log on Windows. You got to log on and log off, user and group creation and such. You have to increase the local event log storage, and you have to forward all that stuff to a central logging system, typically with Sysmon. Sysmon is a Microsoft sysinternals tool that will accumulate log entries and forward them. And so on Unix, you do the same thing. You have to process, account for your processes and other events, and again, forward them to a centralized logging system. And all your other devices, web servers, proxies, firewalls, database servers, DNS servers, they all need to be logging stuff and sending it to your central repository of log data so you can find it. So your antivirus and your host intrusion protection system, of course, have to be doing that. And they have to be set not to delete malware, but save a copy, because we very likely want to look at that malware and analyze it and figure out what it did. And they have to also not be reporting those suspicious files back to the vendor. This is how shadow brokers got the NSA exploits. An NSA worker had the top secret military attack tools that we use to attack other countries, and then put it on a machine with Kaspersky antivirus on it. And Kaspersky detected it and sent it back to Kaspersky, and now the Russians had it. And everyone is now screaming and yelling at each other, what did you do that for? It's your fault, it's your fault. And a lot of people can say whose fault it is, but the fact is that's what it does. Your antivirus will send it back to some central party, and you probably don't want that happening. Even if it's not the Russians, you really don't want to tell some stranger automatically what's on your machines. You want to control that. And you got your investigative tools. Access Data has got their version, and Guidance Software has theirs. Mandia has a tool too. There are a lot of these tools that will try to make it easier for you to find the artifacts. Typically, you have to do a bit of your own scripting, though. And typically WMI queries are your most powerful tool for Windows. But we're going to show you can get pretty far with canned stuff that's designed to work with Splunk. There's a community, a large community of Splunk users, and they have written the tools to harvest data from anything and put it in Splunk. So you can just download the Splunk tool to get the Fortinet logs and the Microsoft logs and Unix logs and everything. And that's what a lot of people do. That's why they love it. You don't have to write a bunch of custom junk. There's a big repository. It's the standard. So there's a huge repository of standard tools you can deploy. And that makes it much more practical. You got to have a patching solution. And of course, like we're saying, two-factor authentication would really make you a lot better off. You got to have your firewalls and your AVs. Application whitelisting would be very nice. I'm surprised how people don't do it. This seems so good. Antivirus tries to list all the badness in the world and remove all the badness. And of course, there's new, fresh badness every day, so that's hopeless. But what you could do is just list all the good apps that I want running on my box, which really should be maybe only 10 things. And don't let anything that isn't on the known good list run. That's whitelisting. This is not commonly done. People tell me it's too hard to manage in a corporate environment because people keep having a new version or putting something new and you have to keep adding to the whitelist. I don't know, man. That sounds to me like less work than hunting down all the malware. But anyway, it is not popular. That's what iPhones do, which makes them so good. You can only run software from the Apple Store. Something that doesn't have the official approval of Apple will not go on its own, and that turns out to be very effective. Anyway, and this is what I was saying. This is your network segmentation. You got to have your finance on its own VLAN, your engineering, sales, IT support. You've got switches and firewalls and proxies and routers all over the place to separate your traffic into all these containers so that if something infects a finance machine, it can't go directly to the internet from there. It can't even go over to the engineering machine and steal things. It's trapped in a little zone here. It has another barrier. That's how you really do it, just like submarines. If the hole in the ground starts flooding, you can't flood the whole thing because it's broken into compartments. This is how you get enough time to notice that something is wrong and respond before they get to your crown jewels. They're hopefully in a different segment. And if you think of the incidents we've already been through, the case histories, they talked about how it took them months when they actually stole the credit card numbers to find some way to get them out. Because this machine can't get to the internet, they had to infect some machine here and then make a tunnel through here and then tunnel over here to finally get to here. It's quite a task to find a way to sneak anything out because of this network traffic control. Yeah.
Yeah, because the command and control sending messages back to.
Well, you do.
Saying, okay, you can't get out, try this.
No, it's actually, well, they have some way to get in, but it's because of this network segmentation and all these access control lists, there's no direct way in. So you have to pivot. You compromise one box, typically in DMZ, then you put malware on it, then you use it to attack another box, and to attack another. So you're actually bouncing through a series of boxes, and you're leaving traces everywhere you go. So it's quite a task to get in a serious corporate infrastructure undetected and steal stuff and get it out. And that's why the Target case, they were talking about how they worked hard to only steal the credit card numbers and nothing else, so there was only a small amount of data to sneak back out. The Chinese were much sloppier with Google. When they hacked them in 2010, they started stealing all their stuff, and they were stealing gigabytes of stuff and sending it straight back to China, and that's how they got caught. They said, why are all our PDFs going to China? Who authorized this? And that got them busted. So anyway, so you got controls at each level, and you should have two-factor authentication for the high privilege borders. And we mentioned Microsoft RPC is necessary for a whole lot of valuable things like file sharing, but it is very dangerous. It turns out if you allow people to share files, they can now do remote execution of code with PSExec. So this is commonly done, so you have to block these things at your borders. You have to only allow Microsoft file sharing within controlled zones and block these ports on outside. If you expose these to the internet, it's just a giant kick-me sign. And here's another example of all this. They'll allow RDP only for the system administrators, the admin workstation. They'll allow JSON in here, and allow databases only in there, and so on. You know, you have to know what kind of traffic should be in each zone and block it everywhere else. That's a proper traffic control system for a network, which means you have a reasonably defensible network. So that's access control, where you can basically router access control list. This kind of traffic can only go here. This kind of traffic can only go there. And on you go. You use encrypted transmissions to your servers. People are finally getting the message on this. We've been saying it for years, but it was the Snowden revelations that really impressed upon everyone the fact that people like the NSA really are inside your network stealing your traffic, and you really need to encrypt the traffic in what you've been calling laughingly your trusted network. Forget about having a trusted network. There's nothing you can trust because your people are bringing in their home laptop and their home USB sticks and everything, and so there is no zone that we have made clean and safe. Just expect that enemies might be sniffing it at every level and encrypt your stuff. Anyway, so workstations should only be allowed to do certain things, and you should not allow people to talk to each other. It's just port isolation. We have it at the college sometimes, and sometimes they turn it off. Starbucks has it. If you do an Nmap scan of a network from Starbucks, there are only 2 devices on the network, you and the router. Everybody is on their own VLAN. And that's what you should generally do. You don't want people attacking or sharing files directly from one workstation to another. You want them sharing from the server that you understand and not other things happening. And you have black holes. People that are sending traffic to unused IP address ranges, you just throw them away. And forbidden traffic, you throw it away. That's what black holes are. You take a certain amount of traffic and you route it to be thrown away, or perhaps logged and then thrown away so you know what's happening, because it's a good way to catch spams. Because nobody will be using those addresses except bad guy hunting for things. Your good guys don't need to go to the unused addresses. Honeypots are a big issue. People talk about them. I agree with your book that this is a waste of time. It's so much work just to protect the good stuff. Adding extra stuff just to confuse bad guys is sort of madness. I think you'd be better off protecting your good stuff than wasting your time trying to trick the bad guy. But it does make for good talks. There's a whole bunch of people in the offensive security world that talk about hacking back. And there was a whole guy that gave a talk at all the security conferences a few years ago about writing malicious files and putting them on your servers so when the bad guy steals them, they get hosed. Like zip bombs and fork bombs and stuff. I said, boy, I really don't think that would lead to good things in my world, because somebody will find it in my network and open it, of course. This is like, I'll leave some landmines around my yard. That'll be swell. I said, boy, I really don't think the results will be that good. In a real company like this, not everybody in my company is going to know not to mess with that stuff. Anyway, you got to have documentation all over the place of all the configurations and your networking, and that's your change control, and all your monitoring devices have to be logged as well, and all your services. So we've talked about that. I got one more set of cahoots, and then I'll show you this Splunk stuff, which you are going to like, I think. All right. I got these winners, so I can remove this, and run this. All right. And good, we got some people online also. All right.
Sam, would it be possible to do an inventory by just shutting every end device off, and then whatever stakeholder comes back in says, I need this machine, and you add it to your inventory?
I have seen people do that. Rondo Erisma does that at the Navy. In the military, you do that. Usually not in the private sector. The question for the real people is, can you just turn everything off and then see who complains to decide what's actually worthwhile? That's what he did. He told everyone to upgrade to IPv6 by a certain date, and on that date, he turned off IPv4. And then the phone rings. They say, I can't get my email, I can't be on Google. He said, well, then do your job. It hangs up on it. Fix your stuff. Every order IPv6 only. And I don't want to hear it. But most people can't take that attitude because your company has a bunch of important things and they're not that serious about your upgrades. That would be nice. But most companies don't have anybody at top really ruthless enough to put up with that. Usually quite the opposite. They'll say, well, we have a sales team and an important presentation and they have to have it work, so let them keep using MS-DOS for another year or two, because like my boss, the company I worked at for years, the boss liked 123 on DOS, never learned Excel. So he had to have a DOS machine running 123. He was really fast at it, and he didn't care. He said, just cope with it. All these passwords were ABC or 123, and on you went. This is quite common. Yeah, and there's another side which I agree with. Once you really learn how to use it, you really don't want to change it. They take away the keyboard shortcuts. They take away the features you need. It really matters. you play that thing like a piano, and the new version really is not the same. Anyway, it is kind of. It is. So you have to, sometimes you have to secure horrible old stuff. Anyway, right. So which log is essential to identify, we've done this one. Well, I guess, I hope they aren't all duplicates. Maybe you can't do these when I go on to the next one if they're all duplicates. What idiot wrote these questions? Anyway. I'm going to give this guy a pay cut. That was kind of amusing. This month they forgot to pay the teachers. Many of them. So that was quite a problem. Anyway, I hear someone, I think I did C first and then B. Oh, did I do that? Oh, well, that would do it. So we've already done C and B I didn't do. Thank you for telling me, because this doesn't look right. Well, then let's look at B. Let's see if B looks like new questions. And if they aren't new, then we'll just forget it. We did B as well. We haven't done A. Well, then, all right. I'm willing to trust this person online, probably paying more attention than me. I get distracted. The technology is so hard. We'll see if this is true. It's a good thing you guys had a quiz before class, so this material is not totally unfamiliar. Anyway, it's all just a way to trick you into reading the book a few times.
That was at NASA, the author.
NASA?
Yeah.
What about him?
He worked there for ages doing forensics.
Who did? Oh, Matt?
First guy listed.
Oh, the author of the book?
Yep.
Oh, okay. Well, good.
They're all from Mandia.
Yeah, they're all, I know Kevin Mandia is anyway there, and I think they're all from Mandia. Yeah. Well, Mandia is the king of this stuff. They pretty much invented this stuff. All right, I'll wait another 5 seconds, and we'll see if these questions are worth doing. Or maybe they're all garbage. Let's see. Yeah. Did we do this? What problems reduced by educating users? I don't think we did this one. All right. All right, good. All right. All right. Adding server software like games, the machines, as well as you might do to their end workstations if they don't know any better. And which one will increase the responsiveness of your outsourced stuff? Oops. There. All right, that's your service level agreement. I'm trying to hit the right size here. All right, next to weed. All right. So system administrator feels abused. What's that? I think it's a normal day, but anyway. Yeah. But that's an exposure, of course. All right. All right. Which situation may make examining log files difficult or impossible? All right, that's the problem with outsourcing. You may not have access to the logs. All right, so let me make a note of these winners, and then I will move on to the glorious, so our Dugan is ×2, and URL, and AE. I know AE, actually that's a name. Earl is going to have to tell me who they are at some point. But anyway, that went on a little longer than I thought with that stuff, but in any case, here comes a note. Perhaps you're going to tell me who somebody is. Come on, there we are. Okay, good. AE. No, okay, L. All right. Earl. All right, I'll make a note here. Hopefully that's enough to uniquely identify you. It's an improvement anyway. All right, so the new project is what I want you to see, and it is here. Okay, this is project 7. I did this thing. I was very happy because it is open source, and you can install it, and I made some progress installing it, and then I found out that I don't even have to, thank God, because they put a version of it online for everybody to use for free. So that's your homework. So let me show. This is what you have to do. You go to this, fill in a form with your email address and a bunch of junk, and then you get a link, and you can now play Boss of the Sock. So I've got it, and I saved the link here. And there it is. So what you get now is there are 2 games. There's something called a CCDC kind of game, which I've not looked at yet. And then there's Boss of the Sock, which has 2 scenarios, ransomware and I think defacement. And so you have a tour, which you should go through that explains everything. I'm not going to bother here. We'll get to the good stuff. So we'll go to, I think it's the defacement is the one we want. Let me, I think the ransomware I decided was too annoying. Yep, this looks right. Yep, that's the one. Okay. Right, so now let's take a look. So the point about this is there's a tour of what tells you what's going on, but here's the story. You come in and your website says Poison Ivy is hacking. This is the APT scenario. The Poison Ivy APT attack team has gotten to you. The other one is the ransomware one, where you have a ransomware warning on your desktop, and I did not assign to you because it was kind of tedious. But this one is good, clean fun. So what you do is you can look at it live in Splunk, and that's what this will do. So let me get this my screen. Okay, this is a live copy of Splunk running on sample data, and this is showing you the metadata, the source types. Now I can see all the data if I just go back to this, just the index. Now Splunk is like Google. What they say, it's Google for events. And this is where you're going to see why you need it. If you just go here, it's going to show me the number of events. And the number of events is very large, like 50,000, which, by the way, is nothing. The live one we did had, I think, 500 million events. That's why it is, if you think about it, you've got your Microsoft event log makes about 1,000 things a second. Your firewall log does everything. There's a lot of data coming. That's why doing hard disk images and RAM images, just forget it. Even just the normal text data, like 50 or 100 bytes of data per event is plenty. So this is 200,000. So it's slowly logging it, getting it all ready. Now, so it's indexing all the events. These are all the events in this scenario, box V1, which is Boss of the Sock, version 1, the old version. And so this is the timeline. It will automatically fill in a timeline showing you events. And it's going to keep going until it's done. Now, it moved pretty fast in the daytime. It's being pretty slow now. I'm sure it'd be even slower if I had my own server. But anyway, it's slowly logging all the events. When it's done, this number will quit changing, and it'll be done. So here's how this works. You've got a timeline you could use to limit the timeline to a certain amount of time. If you don't specify, it'll be all time, and everything we're doing, we'll just leave it at all time. They warn you that it'll move a lot faster if you limit the time. So it's searching for smaller things. Now, the recommended procedure. Okay, what's going on here? These are the events. This is what an event looks like. So here's an event from FGT traffic. That's the FortiGate firewall. So here's all the information. At this time, on this date, something happened when one Russian Federation, some traffic came in from Russia, and for some reason the firewall made an event about it. I suppose that means the firewall blocked it because it was on a forbidden port or something. Here's another event, and notice how it's a totally different format because it came from a different device. This came from Stream. Splunk Stream is their sniffing product, like Wireshark, that takes raw data off the network and it sorts it into a few general categories like TCP, UDP, and HTTP, and puts the whole package here in this format, or at least a lot of the packet. I don't know if the whole packet is there. So this is just the same problem Google has. You've got maybe 20 data sources, and they're all in different formats. They have different layouts, they have different names for the fields. It's just a bloody mess. And the point of it, this is the same problem Google has. You're going to index the web, there's a billion pages, they're all just randomly different. So you have to find things anyway. That's the frustrating thing. There is not like one field for IP address that's the same everywhere. There's like, if you have 20 sources, there's probably 20 different ways to express the IP address. So when you search, it's hard to find the right field. So anyway, what you see here are all the fields on the left. So this is what raw data looks like. And there are like 500,000 of those things. And I think it's finally done. 955,807 events. And here are the fields that were by default selected, things like source IP, and the number next to it is how many different values there are. So there's something called command line in some of the events. There's more than 100 different variations there, but there's only 8 different hosts in the whole network. And if you click this, you'll see what they are. So the 8 hosts in my network are that, not that many. So this is, these look like maybe the end devices, and here's some kind of server. One of these is undoubtedly the web server. This is, they set up a network in the guy's basement. He simulated like a corporate domain and then a bunch of attacks and a bunch of normal traffic. And it ran a website. And this one runs a website, which is Wayne Industries from Batman. And it's under attack. So then you got interesting fields down here. Now what they recommend, usually to start with, is first go to source type. You get an idea what you've got. This shows you what kind of data you have anyway. And you do have to learn like the most common 6 or 8 kinds of data to deal with. This is one of the main ones, is Sysmon. Sysmon is the free Windows tool to gather Windows event log entries and send them off to ship, and also to increase the number of event log entries. You can configure syslog to monitor things. And syslog and Splunk work together. This is very helpful. So this is a real important, you'll almost always see this. This is the main thing you use on Windows systems to just record what's happening on one server. Then you've got stream data, which is direct network sniffing done by Splunk. And then Suricata is an open source intrusion detection system. There's a bunch of them. This is one that we use commonly used. And therefore, it scans the network and it sends alerts for what it recognizes as known attacks or malware. So these are high value events. And you see I got 125,000 of those, but 270,000 Microsoft event log entries, most of which are probably unimportant and harmless. These are registry information, which I think also came from Sysmon. I'm not sure. I think that's how it monitors the registry and sends it up. Here's FortiGate, firewall traffic. There's a few FortiGate kinds of alerts. And that's all I'm seeing there. But there are a few others. Anyway, those are your sources. And you could start by just focusing on one source. So if you wanted to just look at one source, like say just the registry changes, you could click on this, and that will automatically change the query to limit it to just that. So you can type queries up here if you learn this language, which is a little more confusing than just Google, but not a lot. Or you can just click on it down here and it will put it up there, which is the right way for beginners anyway. And so this is trying to be Google for your network forensics. And it approximately is, but it's pretty easy to fall off the track and get lost. There's happening to be a lot during the competition. So that's what you have here, which I think is bloody awesome because you don't have to worry about setting it up. You can just start using it. So there's a command called pipe metadata that will do a summary. So now I don't even need to bother. I can get the summary by just clicking on one event. And then, so now we can go here to the APT scenario. And it will ask you some questions you can answer. So here's the graphic. Your site has been defaced, and we're going to analyze this in terms of the Lockheed Martin kill chain. This is the standard thing you'll see in all our classes where you have reconnaissance. This is the plan. Step 1 is recon. They run scanners on your network to find out what you've got. Then they find something vulnerable. Then they attack it with some kind of exploit to get some kind of backdoor into a system. Then they deliver some kind of malware to it. Then they exploit, run code on your system. Then they install that on your system. Then they have command and control center connecting. And then they start pivoting and taking over other systems. This is the steps of the kill chain. And everything we're doing here is step 1, recon. We're trying to detect the scans that brought it in. Although we will later find the malware they put on the system and stuff as you go through this. So the first question is find the IP scanning your web server. Somebody ran a bone scanner on your web server to find it. And bone scanners will send thousands or millions of requests to the server, all from the same IP address. very fast. So they're pretty easy to spot. So here, the name of the web server is I'm really not Batman.com. That's the website. So if you just put that in the query, then you will get the events that have that string somewhere in the alert. And that will take us from the 1 million down to a smaller number. Okay, I think the answer is like 60,000 or something. Yeah, only 60,000. Notice how much faster it is. We had 1 million. Now I'm focusing on just the ones that refer to the web server. So there aren't that many of them. But these still come in from only 4 sources now. Suricata, HTTP Stream, the firewall, and IIS, which is the web server itself. It's Microsoft's IIS server. So the Suricata data is, of course, the attack data. So it would make sense to focus on that. And when you do it, you'll see here Suricata information that refers to the website. And you can look at it here. None of this is too obvious. But if you go over here and look at the fields, there's a signature ID, and then there's a signature. There are only 47 different values of that signature. And if you look at it, those values are actually pretty easy to understand. That's the point of an IDS, cross-site scripting attempt. Someplace down here, SQL injection attempt. This is understandable. The point of Suricata, it detected that and found it. So these are definitely the scanner trying all the attacks, or the bad guy attacking us. And now the question is, how many IP addresses came in? And the answer is 3. Only 3 source IPs did this. And if you look at it, a whole bunch of it came from this 40 address. A much smaller amount came from this address, and a very small amount from this address. And that's a private address. That's on my own network. So this is obviously the bad guy's IP. We have found the remote site that ran a scanner against us. And if we have any doubt about that, we can filter it to just this traffic. And when you do that, the query will now be a little more complicated. So the query is now, I'm really not Batman.com, source type equals Suricata, and source IP equals that. So I'm now looking at only the traffic from that one guy. And if I look at the traffic, from that one guy, I can now see the signatures. Now, I don't see the alert signature offered to me here, but you can find it with all fields. Here are all hundreds of fields. You can filter it, like sig for signature. Here's the signature. So I can add that to my list by checking it here. And now that it's on my list, it will show me that there are 46 of them. So this is the stuff that came from that one guy. And it was all those evil attacks. So that is, oh, the other thing I wanted to show you is, if you look at one of them, they identify themselves. This is an issue of this scanner. We can get the brand name of the scanner. And I might be able to see it by just viewing it as raw text, but perhaps not. There is a way to get the more than the signature. Oh, if you go to the full HTTP stream, there's a way to see it, and it'll show you the brand name. So let me go back to my instructions here and see if there's anything else I wanted to give you, because they guide you through this. And this shows you the selected fields, source type and source IP. We've been through that. There's the events, 76% of them coming from there. We examine individual events from Suricata. Yeah, there. I wanted to look at event number 2. Okay, so let me go here. Here I am. I think we're, and I wanted to look at this event number 2. But I think I'm all set for that. Perhaps not. Okay, let me try and see if I can get back on my track here. I wish I hadn't cut the query off here. I'm really not Batman. And source type. Source IP, okay, 40, that's right. And event 2, this is the one. Oh, this showed me the whole thing. Okay, anyway, I don't want to struggle there. HTTP events. Let me see if I can do this one. This is why it looks easy, but in fact, it's easy to get lost. So I want to find the full HTTP stream traffic that came from that device. So I'm going to start here with I'm really not Batman, and go to source type stream HTTP instead of Suricata, because Suricata gave me the IDS alert. And the IDS alert did not show me the full web and request and response. It showed me their interpretation of it. This is SQL injection attempt or something. And they won't tell me what the scanner is. I need to go back and look at the stream. So let's go back to Splunk. And I want to use a different source type, but still keep the same source IP. So I can just delete this the way you would in Google, and now search again, and it will only take a few seconds to find all the traffic from that source IP to the website. And when I go down here, finish, okay, now it's done. There's 38,000 of those, all from the same source IP. Now if I go to source type, there's two things, Suricata and HTTP stream that created that. So if I click this, I'll get just the HTTP streams that came as part of the scan. And now the HTTP stream should have the whole story. So this is the response. And someplace down here, I will find the name of the scanner. If I can find a request, this is a post. It's, yeah, here it is, Accunetrics Web Vulnerability Scanner Free Edition. Because this is what commercial scanners do. They scan your website by sending millions of requests to it, and they put the brand name of the scanner in every packet, so you'll know what's going on, because they don't want criminals using it. So you'll know if it's your team doing it, if somebody else doing it, it'll be right there. So you can tell what brand of scanner was used, unless they are smart enough to customize their software that they're using. This is apparently a script kiddie kind of person that would actually use the free version of a commercial product, unmodified, to scan the server. I brought down the City College server with this product, actually. About 8 years ago, I had taught a summer class in hacking, and I had a professional pen tester want to take my class. And I said, gee, you're a professional pen tester. Why do you take my class? He said, well, see, what I do on my pen test is I run a scanner, I print out the PDF and hand it to the client. And when they ask me what it means, I don't know. I'm like, wait a minute. I feel like yelling at him, you're charging money for that. And I said, well, on the other hand, here he is. He figured out he needs to do something. He's coming to take a class. I said, well, okay. He said, I'll bring my scanner. You can try it out. I said, sure, bring it. So I asked Tim, can we scan the network? We'll be gentle. You probably won't notice a thing. He said, oh, sure, it'll be fine. Because what I thought we would do is manually test things. So he brought this thing, and I didn't know what this thing does. It runs your network connection as fast as it can for like 24 hours. Millions of requests. Everything's flooded. Okay, he found there was a page called Postman or Mailman or something that was from 1997 on the City College website at that time, which was an old Unix product to subscribe to email lists. And it had about 20 fields, all completely unfiltered. So every one of the fields had like cross-site scripting, every other thing. So it sent like 100 requests to every field, 10,000 total requests. Every single one of them led to an email in the administrator's inbox saying something defective content in the field or something. So it clogged up the email server that went down. A bunch of the network stopped working. It turned out, so all I knew is he started running a scanner. It ran for like all day. Well, we'll let it go all night. Suddenly, our lab was off the internet. Hey, what's wrong with the internet? That it turned out that Tim did not tell the network team. He said, I'm going to give them a little test. We'll see if they notice. Well, they noticed. and they figured some running an attack from the hacking lab, so they disconnected the hacking lab from the network. And then I had a thought. I said, you know, I got permission to do this test, but I didn't actually get it in writing. Now it occurs to me, it would have been better to make sure I really had that permission in writing. But thankfully, Tim remembered that he gave me permission. Otherwise, you know, I might be at a different college. Anyway, so, but anyway, this product will really scream the server down. Anyway, that's what I wanted to show you. You do other things here. You will actually find the malware, get the MD5 signature, go look it up. You can totally find out where it came from, when it was first observed, what it does. It's, you know, it's very nice and good to learn. And I'm really happy that you get a chance to focus on what you need to learn, which is how to use this interface to find good stuff. Because in a real company, you have like a team set this thing up. And then you have junior analysts have to learn how to find things out. So this is the thing you'll really do on the job, not setting it up, but using it. Using it is challenging enough. So I really appreciate Splunk making this available for free so you can learn how to use it without having to worry about how to set it up, which is where I used to be in my classes. There's a bunch of administrative rules, labor in setting it up, but that's not the important thing right now. So check it out. It's good, clean fun. And there's a bunch of extra credit stuff at the end. And you know, this was I'm really glad Splunk did this. So that's what I wanted to show you. And I'm just going to clean up and go up to the lab. If anybody got any questions, let me know. And somebody, I think, still has to tell me that, oh, I guess I have some version of a real name for everybody. So I can give you your points or something close to it. All right. So I'm going to stop the share. If anybody got anything to say online, I'll wait a few seconds. Maybe not. Okay. Farewell. All right. And I'll post this video later. We're down to my low quality amateur video today, but it'll be better than nothing, I guess. I'll send this email before I forget, so my grader knows to give you guys some points.
So I didn't register yet.
Oh.
Dropped off. Do these ever expire?
I think they do. I think now it's not. Now you have to do, I think, a late edit, which is a different form.
Oh, great. Okay. I called the help desk and
yeah, there's a late edit. Yeah, I'm happy to sign it. I don't think it'll do any good, but the system here is. You got a pen? Yeah. Okay, I'm happy to sign it, but I don't even know where I would. That's department chair. Instructor or department chair. Okay, I can do that. But I think you'll have to fill out a late one. Okay, give it a shot.
What about 3 quizzes? Final.
Oh, sure. And you shouldn't take any points off for being late. Don't worry about that. Just let us know.
Would I still be able to take it if once I get my canvas?
Yeah, you can do it anytime. In fact, you don't even have to register that. Just send an email to the address 152 Shan. The class, and she'll do it, and then you can take quizzes. And you know, I'm
cool.
Yeah. I'm letting everybody do that, even if you're not enrolled or anything.
Yeah.
So,
No, I was last week and
it's still recording.
never fun.
Oh, and recording. All right.